So here I am. This is an M4A2E8. And I'll get into that in a little bit for you people out there who may think this is an A3. So this is Battling Bitch, and yeah, seeing this tank last year, thought it was pretty cool. So this tank here, this has the M4A2 76mm gun. Some variants would actually have an M4A1, which didn't have a muzzle brake. It was about this barrel length, but it was a smoother barrel. And then there'd be also an upgraded version, which would be the M4A1C. As I said, this one's the M4A2. Now, what's not typical of an M4A2 is you can kind of see it through the mud. This has been ran recently. The HVSS suspension, which was actually pretty good suspension. Other thing to point out is it does have a coaxial 30 caliber. And then on the front here, now this has a thicker glacis plate than the earlier Shermans, which was kind of an important feature and increased survivability. Also, the crew hatches for the bow gunner and the driver were larger. On the front glacis, they have it covered right now. You have a bow 30 caliber machine gun, which was pretty popular then. At the time, main guns weren't stabilized, although with the Sherman they actually did have a stabilization system. Not a whole lot of tankers knew how to use them though. And then you'd have the gunner and the loader and the commander and the turret. Now, one thing to point out too, and this is where we get to the part where it's an A2, this actually has a diesel engine. It's a GM dual diesel. So actually you have two smaller diesel engines in the rear. Most tanks, this reminds me a lot of an A3, which it really is close to an A3. It is a later war Sherman. Would have Ford GAAs instead. But this was, the multi-bank diesel was considered a reliable engine. And the owner of the vehicle did explain to me that the diesel engine was more reliable than actually the Ford GAA, and it was also a more powerful engine. Of course, you have your rubber track pads, you have your track skirts, exhaust in the rear here. That port there could be used for a pistol, but also shells could be thrown out of that port. Although that wouldn't be the case with any models that were equipped with the 105mm gun. The 105mm casings were just too big. But the 76 could fit out of there, the 75s could fit out of there. Now on the back here, that's where the 50 caliber machine gun would be mounted. It could be used by the TC, but he would actually have to climb out of the vehicle to use that machine gun. So more often than not, any accompanying infantryman, an infantryman would climb up onto the engine deck and use the 50 caliber machine gun. As you can also see, it's a fairly tall vehicle. I'm 6'2", and it's easily taller than me. And that's actually because you have a rear mounted engine, and then there's a drive shaft that runs through the tank to the transmission in the front of the vehicle. So the drive is in the front instead of the rear. The tank worked. It was a good tank for America. It was, in my opinion, was like the perfect tank for the perfect time. You know, America used it, Canada used it, the British used it, the Russians had them. Actually, it's recently come out that the Russians absolutely love them. Just look up Loza. He was actually a Russian tank commander in World War II for the Soviet Army, and actually he had an A2, which it would be very reminiscent to this A2 here. Total said than done, there would be 42 different countries that use this vehicle, and some you could still find in service today. Now most of them have been upgraded to the Israel M51 Super Sherman standard, where it's got a 105mm anti-tank gun instead of the 76. And this tank actually is credited, not this one in particular, but the Sherman is credited for taking out T-54s and T-55s. As another thing to point out of this vehicle, a lot of people want to talk about, you know, this vehicle is a death trap. Consider this, that casualty rates in a Sherman was about 3% versus casualty rates in the infantry nearing 18%, and most of the casualties were actually outside of the vehicle. Maybe they got hit by a strafe run, shot by a sniper, maybe an artillery shell landed nearby and they got hit with shrapnel and wounded. There was actually a lot more survivors that crawled out of Sherman tanks than in any other tank of the war. Yeah, they could be knocked out, but what couldn't be knocked out? I mean, you know, people talk about the Tiger. Well, the Tiger wasn't invincible either. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the Sherman tank. It's a good running tank.